for attending. This is the Information Technology and General Services Committee. It will now come to order. A quorum is present, and we'll take the items up in order that they appear on the agenda, starting with item number 1.
Item number 1, motion, Weezarg rule relative to notifying city departments of the correct method in which to refer official reports and documents in order to ensure that the city clerk is included and related matters.
Okay. Is anybody here to report on this matter? And also, this was generated out of the chairman of the Audits Committee, Weezarg. Does staff want to bring us up to speed about how the chairman feels about this?
Yes, good afternoon. Eric Sanquitcal, Councilmember Weezarg's office. We did this motion because we made an effort over the course of several months to come out with a better way of handling the processing of documents with the clerk, the controller, and the multitude of city departments that we have to work with. And one or two of the issues that came up repeatedly is that it was clear that city departments did not understand the proper way of processing reports. They routinely do not include the city clerk in the CCs that they do, which the consequence of which is that the council members, the mayor, the controller are often told about what's happening, given responses. The clerk is left out of the loop, and the reports do not make it onto the file. So I myself and our CLA were spending an inordinate amount of time trying to track down reports, which we found in many cases were actually posted on the city controller's website. And when we pointed this out to the clerk, we were told that a hard copy had to be hand-delivered to the clerk's office in order for it to made it to the record. So ideally, if we could just have the departments given a letter, which I believe they've been told some time ago in the past, the correct way of processing reports, that would be great. But as a backup, we also are suggesting that perhaps the clerk should be empowered to use the documents that are on the city controller's website as a backup, particularly when we are trying to get things onto an agenda and we don't have time to navigate through the bureaucracy and get all the paperwork properly processed. So I understand the clerk isn't crazy about the way the language in the second clause is written. I was going to suggest we could write it a little bit differently to suggest that the clerk be permitted to include documents that are posted on the city controller's website in its council file management system, should they not already be included. Essentially, the city clerk should, in our opinion, have faith that the controller is going to post public documents that are authentic, and that there is no reason not to, in this day and age, accept electronic copies that are available publicly as a valid form of communication.
Well, also, I'm sure there's nothing in here that says that if the controller doesn't post it or the controller doesn't give a hard copy to the clerk's office, that we are going to still expect that the clerk's office magically report that to the council, right? So we are, this motion is asking the clerk's office to figure out a way to be much more accurate and efficient between the communications between the controller's office and the council. Any comments?
Good afternoon. My name is Conrad Carter. I'm from the City Clerk's Office. According to the information that's on the agenda, we wholly approve what is listed there, which basically says notifying city departments of the correct method in which to refer official reports and documents to ensure that the city clerk is included. Education is wonderful. We can provide that service. We can go out and tell each of the departments, council deputies, CLA, whomever, the correct process for submitting documents.
You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink.
Exactly.
Okay.
The problem is the city clerk, by charter, is a repository of information. We don't go out and search for information. We accept information that's sent to the attention of city council. So a CC or something along those lines doesn't work unless it has a direction to the city council for city council's action. At that time, when we receive something that is directed to the city council, we scan it into the system, we have it referred to the appropriate committees, we upload it onto our council file management system, and the information is available to everyone. The problem we have with the second part of the motion is it really sets a precedence. The city clerk has never had any policing authority, and it really puts our neutrality in a strange position. We're going to monitor an elected official's website for information that might be important to another elected official. Really does away with our civil service protections.
What was that last part?
Yeah. The city clerk is not staff to council. It is a separate entity. We work for the mayor, we work for the departments, we work for the council, and I'm just afraid that with asking us to monitor an elected official's website for information that another council office might find important, first off, we don't have the analytical ability to do that. We're involved with process. That would be the CLA's job or the council deputies. And it's more appropriate just to leave us where we are as a repository of information, to accept the information and to process it to city council's attention and action.
Now,
I'm sorry.
in this case, the controller seems to be creating reports and/or documents relative to audits or what have you, that the council or slash the chairman of that committee could choose to agendize.
Correct.
Okay.
But that information is not directed to the city council. It's simply placed on their website.
Uh-huh. Now, how do you bring things to the attention of the council?
When it
What
is-
happens, and then therefore you bring it
In
to
this
attention?
particular case, there is an arrangement that has been worked out between, I believe, the council office, the chair of the audits committee, and the controller, that each time they get documents in, and what these are is report backs, an audited committee, and then a communication between the controller and the audited department, they oftentimes just send it back to the controller. There's no requirement that it be sent also to council's attention. And when the controller gathers these up, they then transmit them to the city clerk with their cover letter on there to the direction of council. So that's the process that's in place now.
Who's the city attorney that knows how to talk about this matter? Any of them present in the room? I know we're talking about the controller.
Mr. Chair, if I could
But-
make one comment about the controller's website, just if you, I'm sure you've probably seen it, but just to remind the committee, it's very clear. It says audit, department response, controller's response to the department's response. On our committee, we will not schedule something until we get all three documents. So if at any point we're missing one of those three documents, we have to either ask the controller to find it, which often has a lag time. Often things get misplaced. We have to play detective quite a lot. It's more complicated than some other committees because we do have these multiple layers of response that we require. I'm looking at the most recent transmittal I got from the clerk on November 26th. It's a letter forwarding a report that was sent to the mayor's attention, and the council was CC'd from November 3rd. Somehow 3 weeks passed. We did have some discussions with the controller. We thought we had some system in place, but frankly, it has not been consistently followed. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. We'd like to see a shorter time between when documents are sent and are clearly official documents as it's being sent to the mayor and CC to the council, and when it gets to our committee, so that we can agendize things more quickly, be more proactive, and not have to spend so much time digging for reports. And again, as he suggested, he didn't like the original languages on the motion. That's why I suggested that we empower the clerk to do this. They can still make a decision if they want to or not to utilize this resource. But I don't understand what civil service issues or what other issues would be in the way with at least giving the clerk the possibility of doing that. Frequently, the CLA or myself will send the link from the controller's website with the relevant document, and that apparently is not enough. We're not asking the clerk to do anything other than just find that report, print it out, slap it into the book with the rest of the
We're
reports.
unable to do that because it does not have a direction to the city council's attention. That's the key here. We accept documents that are sent to the city council
So
for
you-
action.
You receive, you don't go fishing, is what
Correct.
you're saying. And what you're
Or
interpreting
repository.
is, if we ask you to please go fishing, then you're assuming that you are taking on an additional responsibility in a whole, not as you feel like it.
We do assist as best we can in processes like that, but as a rule, we do not want to be involved in seeking information from departments or other elected officials.
It sounds to me as though the more direct remedy here would be to, and that's why I wanted to hear what the city attorney has to say. The more direct way to handle this would be to make sure that any reports that have any legislative purview before, during, or after those reports, that the city council be formally apprised of that by whatever department or elected office is involved and engaged in that kind of matter that does have that falls within purview of the council, that would, in this case, be subjected to whether or not the chairman of the committee wants to agendize it, obviously via the president of the council, but if the council decides to agendize it at the appropriate committee. Because the clerk is not part of the legislative body.
No, we're neutral.
Yeah. But the city council has the responsibility and authority, at least by my understanding, to give those kinds of directives to everybody in the city, because there is only one legislative body in the city of Los Angeles, and that is the city council. It's not the mayor, it's not the controller, it's not the clerk's office, it's not the city attorney's office, it's the city council. So unfortunately, I think what we're forced to do here is we're forced to, since the city attorney's office is not present to shed some light on this, is to put this item over until we can actually get some more technical clarification from the city attorney's office as to what the proper way in which the council needs to, for lack of a better way of putting it, assert its responsibility and authority in these processes of such reports. Is there anything else you'd like to add? But do you understand what I'm getting at? The city clerk actually can, but the moment we do that as described, then other electeds in the city can go ahead and think that they can tell the city clerk what to do, etc. Inevitably, in the motion, the city clerk is going to be involved in some fashion, but at what point in time in that involvement they engage, i.e. being a repository rather than going out fishing for information, that's why I wanted to have the city attorney explain to us what keeps their neutrality, what keeps the fairness. I don't even get the civil service comment, but anyway, I'll ask the city attorney about that. But the bottom line is, we are the city council. We are the policy-making body within the city. Nothing should be happening around here that we feel is within our purview, and we have to go fishing for it ourselves. It should be brought to our attention, and then we'll decide whether or not we want to attend to it or just not attend to it. Anything on that?
No, I think we need the clarity in that. I can understand the sensitive issue with the clerk, that it takes them somewhat out of their task. It would appear, that in all things being equal, that there would be some working relationship with the city controller to produce the documents in a fashion to where they would get additional review, and I don't know what and why that would be a hang-up, because the issue of the council scrutiny of those audit reports is really the only way you're going to get them implemented, in the sense of ensuring that the findings, the funding, and everything else gets addressed, gets within a council committee that moves forward on it. So I'm kind of betwixt and between as to why that issue can't get resolved outside of some legal.
Mr. Parks, I was aware that, at least I thought, that the issue had been resolved with working with the controller's office.
Well, apparently some cooperation was attempted, right? But it appears that the chairman of the committee is now letting this committee know that we were hoping, expecting that that would have been resolved, and it looks like we're back to old habits, right?
For the most part.
Okay.
Yeah. The controller also, as I mentioned in the motion, the controller simply would instruct departments to CC the council or CC the clerk. That would also resolve the issue, but at this point, this current controller didn't want to do that because there's so many drafts that go between the departments and the controller. We get that. But the point is, once it's a final draft, once the controller puts it on the website for public consumption,
Yeah.
It's implicit that,
So
that's something that
You're not
council
asking
has a right to
for
discuss.
all umpteen versions of the draft. You're just asking
Final version.
the version that they actually post. At that point in time, not only post it, but actually forward a copy, i.e. to the clerk.
Yes, and they
or
have been.
To the council.
Usually.
But obviously, by sending it to the clerk's office feels very confident that when you do receive these copies and there's appropriate notice that needs to be provided to the council, you do so,
Yes,
right?
we sure
So-
do.
So there really is no need for duplication of efforts by the controller's office. Post, send a copy to the clerk, we're done. But obviously, that's not happening. Okay? But unfortunately, I think that the city attorney's office needs to weigh in. I know we're talking about the controller's office, but the city attorney's office needs to weigh in on the interpretations of how we do that appropriately, legally, and hopefully efficiently. And
Seems like you should purchase a little small CC stamp.
it's all pitchy.
Yeah. And give it as a Christmas gift.
All right. So,
Let me ask one question, the city clerk.
Yes, sir.
And I know this is not on the agenda, but I just want to ask, what is the status of our long-awaited motion tracking system?
Well, actually, we have something similar to that, which is the council file management system, and ITA is currently involved with motion tracking. I believe there's a couple council offices that are currently working with it as a pilot, and it should be expanding soon. I can't speak for the ITA, though.
Thank you.
okay. All right. Thank you. And Eric, how do you say your last name? Oh, really? They're like Portuguese or something? Interesting. I always look at the spelling and I say, I must be saying his name wrong. Okay, now I know. Thank you. So with that, this item will be put over and we'll instruct, well, I can't instruct the city attorney's office. We'll ask that the city attorney's office convene the proper individual from their office to meet with Jose Huizars, him and or his representative and my representative to look over the preliminary legal issues, and then subsequent to that, it'll be determined at that meeting as to whether or not another meeting needs to be convened also with the clerk's office and the controller's office so that they can defend their interpretations and positions on what they think the proper remedy should be with it, people still within the confines of their responsibilities and neutralities, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? All right. I don't know when we're meeting in January. So we'll put this item to the third week in January. I'm sorry, these next few weeks are going to be pretty rough. Okay. All right. So we'll have it at the latest the third week of January. If not, we'll agendize it beforehand if these meetings convene soon enough and we can resolve this. Okay. Thank you. Item 2.
Item number 2, CRA report and resolution relative to authorization for transfer of $800,000 of AB 1290 funds to the city for the acquisition of 406 North Gaffey Street in connection with the second phase of the Gaffey Welcome Park, San Pedro, and the Pacific Corridor Development Project and related matters.
Good afternoon. My name is Susan Totaro. I'm the project manager for the Pacific Corridor Redevelopment Project Area in San Pedro. The action before you is a request to approve a transfer of $800,000 derived from AB 1290 funds, which is derived from tax increment, which is the a share of the tax increment that goes to the council, and in this case to the Council District 15, Councilwoman Han's office. There has been a request and a motion approved by the council in April 2008 for the CRA General Services Department as well as Recreation and Parks to seize upon an opportunity for property for sale at the corner of O'Farrell and Gaffey, which is in the vicinity of the pedestrian bridge when you exit the 110 freeway as you enter into San Pedro. So there's a piece of property there, approximately 15,000 square feet, listed for sale for $875. Council office requested the various city departments to get together to see if we could find the funds and do an extension of a very lovely welcome park that was completed by Recreation and Parks in September 2007. So this would be a nice sort of extension to open space, greenery, as well as a recreational trail that is also being constructed by Recreation and Parks called the Bandini Canyon Trail. And so we ask that you consider this item. The offer was made by General Services Department for $800,000, and it is subject to the property being cleaned. We are aware that there is some contamination issues on the site. It was a former Shell oil gasoline station, and there is a decontamination guarantee that Shell will perform the remediation, and we will be working with Recreation and Parks and General Services to monitor that effort. But the escrow is subject to it being clean.
Okay, anytime a property's got contamination, I get a little nervous when any government entity decides that they're going to take it on. By my experience, we don't have a very good track record of covering ourselves and making sure that we don't have extra expenditures that we didn't anticipate. Do we have a standard format in which we enter into escrow and require sellers to provide the property at their expense to be cleaned before it's considered ours, or before we give them the money? How are we supposed to do this to make sure that they don't take the money and run, and we're sitting there as a government entity saying, well, I guess we got to clean it now. By the way, what's the cleanup cost? $1.2 million? Oh, well, let's go find the money and let's clean it up because we now own it. That's my concern. Who can give us the information we need to understand that that kind of scenario is not going to happen?
Well, my colleagues are sitting in the audience, but I can certainly give you the experience of the redevelopment agency.
They're pretty quiet.
I'm Dan Weissman. I'm an environmental engineer with the Community Redevelopment Agency. I've dealt with a number of properties similar to this, and basically every property is a little different, so there isn't a standard form, and you're also correct that the city historically is...
Hold on a second. My question wasn't whether or not there's a standard form of doing the clean up. Is there a standard form in which we protect ourselves to make sure that if we ever have to go to court or challenge the owner, that they clean it to the proper standard, not to some kind of standard that they felt it should be cleaned up to?
Okay. Again, every property is different, and this cleanup standard does depend on the use and also who was doing the cleanup. In this particular case, this gas station was owned by Shell Oil Company, and the agreement here is with Shell to do the cleanup. They're already liable as the original responsible party, and they were already working on doing the cleanup, so we have worked on an indemnity agreement with them, so they will continue to fulfill their obligations so that we can use it as a park. We've also had the city attorney look at that to make sure that that is acceptable to them in terms of liability protection. So with that agreement in place, we would not be facing any cleanup costs because of Shell being a large company and able to handle something like this.
Well, I think that when it comes to these kinds of matters, we're better off dealing with somebody like Shell than some mom and pop, because the mom and pop might not have the wherewithal to clean it up, because sometimes the cleanup is in excess of the actual value, appraised value of it. And that's where the big companies know that it's better to just clean it up and be done with it than have this thing lingering on their books or lingering in their PR. So you're saying that Shell, the current owner or previous owner?
Shell's a previous owner. The current owner is a mom and pop. They also have an agreement with Shell. They had an existing agreement with Shell to do the cleanup, and we are entering our own agreement. So the current owner will be out of the picture. Basically, as you said, we would not be able to guarantee they'll be in place in the future, but so it's preferable to have Shell actually continue.
So the cleanup is an agreement between Shell and us, the potential new owner?
It's an indemnity agreement. Shell itself has an agreement with the water board to essentially do cleanups that would be acceptable to the water board. Kind of, basically, they would present this when they're ready to show to the water board. Say, here's our cleanup, and the water board would then approve it. At that point, that would be declared a clean site.
So the water board is the entity that's going to give us all the comfort in knowing that when they give the clearance, the site is now clean.
Yes,
Yes.
ultimately.
And that level of being clean satisfies us legally and also practically for the purposes and the use that we want to use it for?
Yes.
Yes,
As
and
a park, right?
as a park, we have included in the indemnity agreement that it has to be cleaned up so that it can be used as a park.
Okay. And the water board, their standards meet that standard.
The water board would not necessarily be looking at it from that perspective, but because we've
But that's my point.
But-
Now, we have to interpret what are those standards, and do those standards meet the standards for the use that we want it for? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes. This is still one of the details that I think is being worked out. The water board doesn't usually do that, look at it that way, but they can. It may be a question of what documents are required to give to them in order to have that assurance, and or what would the city would look at as being acceptable. So.
But do you understand what I'm getting at? Just because the water board is satisfied with their terms doesn't mean that when they get the sign off from there and Shell says, goodbye, everybody, we're done, that we don't sit there and say, oh my gosh, we still got to do another $100,000 in cleanup because for our purposes, we need to do more.
It is our understanding that we would be communicating with the water board to ensure that the remediation is conducted so that it can be used for park purposes. Now, you raised an excellent issue that in the event that it is more costly, then the city family has to get together prior to the close of escrow to deal with that amount. And since we don't know what it is yet, but you're right that we would be informing water board that we want it to be clean pursuant to park standards.
Okay. So help me understand here. What's before us is the request to be able to move the $800,000,
Correct.
and that is the purchase price, $800,000.
Correct.
So you want to move that into escrow for the purposes of waiting for all clearances of escrow so as to get clean title, clean property, and close? Or do you want $800,000 so you can close?
We want the authority to transfer the funds to allocate it for this piece of property, however, subject to a number of conditions that we've just discussed with respect to clean, how we resolve the contamination. But we just want the authority to transfer it subject to assurances that it can be used and remediated pursuant to park purposes.
Well, I would expect that we wouldn't close escrow and get the deed of ownership to a property until all escrow conditions are satisfied. In this particular case, one of the most important outstanding conditions is the fact that this has been identified as a property that has contamination, chemical contamination, and needs to be cleaned up, in this case, to the water board standards. So that's all in the escrow documents, that's all in the purchase documents, that those are the conditions in order for us to legally be able to close?
Dave Roberts? Yes, correct. He handled it.
Come on, the microphone. I want to know who you are, I want to know who you work for, I want to know why you said that.
David Roberts, General Services, Property
Yes.
Manager. I'm in charge with the acquisition of the property, and
Okay.
at this point, we have gone through all the documents, and what has been said is correct. We will not take ownership of the property until we have clearance that all conditions have been met.
Now, we're not engaging in one of those things that big companies do easier and better and more often than not for mom and pops. For example, we're not letting somebody like Shell say the cleanup, apparently the estimates on the cleanup, say they get 3 estimates. And the estimates on the cleanup is about top end $300,000. We're not going to let them put $500,000 into an escrow and then close escrow with the current owners and then do the cleanup.
No.
We're talking about the physical cleanup and sign off will happen before we actually release the funds to the seller and close escrow and take title.
And not to be cumbersome, but what is happening is Shell has an agent that's going to do the cleanup for us. They're authorized by Shell. We've talked to all their legal staff, and they have a process for which they go to clean a property, it has to meet their own internal standards as an agency, so as a corporation. So we're relying upon their agents to do that, as well as our own internal staff to verify what they're doing is actually going to take place. So we will not take ownership of this property until all those conditions have been satisfied internally and also with external reports.
And including the water board.
That's correct.
Okay.
This is not a blind purchase. We know exactly what we need to do, and we do not intend to take ownership until those all have been satisfied.
Okay, because various government entities have made the mistake of saying, well, there's plenty of money set in place to do the cleanup. We take ownership, the cleanup is being paid for, and oops, they found out there's more contamination, and then the big firm with big high-priced lawyers decides to fight us on it instead of just spending the extra $100,000 or $200,000 to clean the darn thing up.
Right. But
I
our
want to be
leverage
caught in
is,
that situation.
our leverage is built on the fact that they want to sell the property, and we're stating to them that if they want to sell the property, they have to meet these standards. And the standards are what's already been described earlier. So we shouldn't be concerned about being left holding the bag.
I hope not. I hope not.
It won't happen.
Better laid plans have gone awry.
You know, we're proceeding with caution because of the reasons you've already brought up, that we will not be left in a position where we've already purchased the property and there's extensive requirements to do additional remediation.
And then all of the liens on the property, things of that nature, we don't have any concerns about getting clear title?
There's no issues. They've been resolved.
Okay. Is this going to Budget Committee? No. It's CRA money, all right. Okay, is there anybody here to make public comment on item number 2? Okay, seeing and hearing none. Item number 2, public comment is now closed. With that, we have a motion to approve. That item's approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your input. Item number 3.
Item number 3, motion Reyes Perry relative to the jurisdictional transfer of the former Cypress Park Branch Library to the Department of Recreation and Parks related matters. This item has also been referred to the Arts, Parks, Health, and Aging Committee.
Okay. Anybody here with either Rec and Parks, GSD, anybody involved in this transaction? After this item, we'll go to item number 6. Yes, go ahead.
Sid Makarag, Recreation and Parks.
What's the approximate fair market value of the property?
Lourdes Owen from Asset Management General Services. There was a Class C done on the property, and it was the value was established at $400,000.
Okay. Right. Anything else you'd like to add in reporting to this committee on this item? Anything else you'd like to add?
Well, for our department, we support the transfer of the property to us. It will give us an opportunity to provide additional resources for a community that certainly lacks a recreation center for community activities. So we do support the motion.
Okay. That concludes the discussion on item number 3. Is anybody here to speak on item number 3? Seeing and hearing none, we have a motion to adopt the item, and the item is adopted. Also, this committee is directing GSD and Recreation and Parks to report to this committee in 45 days on the status of the acquisition of the project. Okay.
Okay.
Just give us an update in 45 days. Thank you. All right, we now move to item number 6.
Item number 6, Joint City Administrative Officer / Chief Legislative Analyst reports relative to the Los Angeles Regional Interoperable Communications System, LA RICS Joint Powers Authority. This item on November 24, 2008 was approved by the Public Safety Committee per the recommendations in the November 19, 2008 Joint CEO-CLA report. This item has also been referred to the Budget and Finance Committee.
Okay. My main focus is to make sure that we don't get into one of these convoluted situations where a few more millions here, a few more millions there, a few more millions here, and before you know it, down the road, we're doubling what we thought we were going to invest. I think the last time I had the county here on this issue, I asked them that question, and I thought they said they were getting us a letter making sure that there's somewhat of a cap on the city's participation, and they're taking the majority of the responsibility when it comes to the overall cost.
Councilmember R.F. Ali Khan, Deputy Mayor, Homeland Security and Public Safety. The way the project is designed is it's a consortium between the county, the city of Los Angeles, and 88 cities within the county, as well as various agencies, both first responder agencies, police, fire, emergency medical service, as well as other agencies, public works, DWP, et cetera. The Joint Powers Authority is a method to create an entity and an agreement between these different jurisdictions to have a process to determine the appropriate share for each of the cities. And that is the funding plan that's mentioned in there. And in the funding plan, there are various safety valves for the city and other jurisdictions to actually opt out of the agreement with no cost incurred for the city if it doesn't agree with the contribution amount that the city is required to provide, or if another jurisdiction seems to be not providing sufficient amount. As part of the JPA, we actually, which has been approved by some jurisdictions, we spoke to the county about actually changing and clarifying some of the language for precisely that reason, to make sure it's clear that members can withdraw from the JPA without cost or with limited cost if they so choose, because the funding plan is unsatisfactory. So in terms of the overall cost, a cap on the cost, I'm not sure that can really be done, and I defer to the experts on this, until we get through the exact design that's necessary and put that out for RFP. At this point, we have estimates of anywhere up to, I believe, $700 million for the total project to make all of the agencies and all the jurisdictions within the county interoperable.
Which our portion of that would be approximately what?
I believe it's about
Patty Huber from the CAO. The amount that the city is going to have to pay is going to be a function of how the costs are allocated across all the jurisdictions that enter into the JPA. At this point, worst case scenario would be that it's just the city and the county, and we duke out what we're going to have to do because none of the other jurisdictions want to join. However, as RF indicated, there are some other jurisdictions, including LAUSD, some of the other smaller cities, I'm not going to remember them off the top of my head, who have already signed on to
there's 88 cities in the county or some figure like that. Yeah.
We
And
may
other
get
entities.
88, we might get 15. I mean,
School district is not a city, so it'd be potentially 89 partners and
Right.
on and on and on.
And so obviously the cost sharing model is going to be different when you have 88 or 89 people versus 2. All of that is going to come down to the negotiation of the funding plan. The RFP is currently being drafted. When we get bids back from that, we should have a better handle on what the total cost of the project was going to be. But the actual really good number is going to be when we have a design. I mean, it's as with any construction project. When you have your design, you have a better sense of what your costs are going to be. And there are different ways to allocate the costs. You could allocate the costs based on the number of users a jurisdiction would have on the system, i.e. the number of radios. And that's one scenario that we put in our report. Another way would be to do it on the representative area of the city. And I think the city is about 11% of the total county area. Going that method gives us a lower cost. But that's going to be something for the JPA board to duke out and figure out how we're going to allocate the costs of the project.
Okay.
And if I could just,
Go ahead.
Sorry, if I could just mention 2 things regarding the cost. The first is that right now the costs that we have incurred and the staffing and monies that we've dedicated have been grant funded through the Urban Area Security Initiative. as well as cobbling from other grants, including a specific grant for interoperability. So the city's general fund exposure up to this point has been limited. The second thing is, if the costs for the system for the city, as Ms. Huber mentioned, vary, one of the things we also have to factor in is the aging of our current infrastructure and the need to replace both police and fire's infrastructure and radios, although we've done some upgrading of radios.
And we're there.
I'm sorry?
And we're there.
Yes, and we're there. As well as one issue that I'm sure they can speak to more broadly, which is the lack of spectrum that the city has. We are running out of channels for the police and fire department, and especially in a catastrophic event, it would be very difficult for all the users to communicate, especially now that we're opening 2 new stations this year that have to have dedicated frequencies as well. So that's one of the major benefits of doing this joint project that we get to the city.
So on the IT aspect of it, how real do we see this project? I mean,
Well, from a can it be done perspective, it can definitely be done. I have always believed that it's better to do better planning than not. So the design phase is going to be critical in order to drive out exactly what the solution is going to look like, as well as what the costs are going to look like. And this is not the kind of solution where you can use any kind of value engineering or whatever, because if we cut corners, we don't know what the implications are going to be on the radios and their operations. So I think it behooves us to go through the process, through design, look at the design and be critical of it, and make sure we understand the coverage, as well as how much spectrum we have, et cetera, and then really make sure we have a good cost analysis, not just the capital costs, but the ongoing costs as well, and then have a more detailed discussion about going forward.
and what's the time frame potentially for us to arrive at that stage?
I have it. I just have to find it. I'm sorry. At this point, the RFP is being drafted. I believe the goal is to release it early in the calendar year. It's anticipated that it'll take approximately a year to get through that process, to put the RFP on the street, to get the responses back, to do our due diligence, then evaluate them, and to negotiate a contract. That's what all the parties who are involved in this are currently estimating. Then it's estimated that system design would take approximately another year. Construction would take a couple of years, testing and training another year, and then migration another 1 to 2 years, depending on how.
Now, in that explanation, Bandy, at what point of that explanation were you referring to?
After the design is done, so that's at about a 2-year period of time.
Okay. Now, the design would be done by the organization that actually, well, I mean, there's going to be a proprietor involved, right? There's going to be a logo on a portion or various logos on this system,
Right.
meaning private entities, right? Who build these kinds of systems. I'm assuming we're looking at a digital system, of course, right? So now, to get to that point, we will have already identified winners and losers as to who's going to be the vendors in this, right?
Correct.
Yes.
Now, up to that point, are we anticipating that this JPA, well, forget about them, us, the city, we're going to be able to carry ourselves through to that point with grant funds mostly, or inevitably by then it'll be a mixture of general fund and grant funds?
I think at this point we have approximately $100 million identified through various grants cobbling together that I know Chief Keen has been working on. I'm not sure how far in the phase that gets us at this
I
stage.
think we have 78.
Or Susan.
Dennis Keen from Fire. Currently, we have $72 million in grants accumulated between various Homeland Security programs. We have,
And that doesn't end, right? Unless
doesn't end.
Congress changes the way they do business,
we're-
we anticipate there will be other opportunities for us to continue to accumulate grant funds for this purpose, right?
Yes, we're just starting the 2009 grant process right now. In fact, today was the first interoperability meeting. We anticipate that we could potentially accrue another $25 million from that. Our goal is to get to $100 to $110 million. That should carry us with grant funds up to the year 2011 before we look at any general fund obligation.
Okay, now, when it comes to that phase that I just had you bring me to, does that would $100 or so million conceivably get us to that phase?
Yes, it gets us through the design phase
Okay.
and right to the point where we're entering construction. And if the design is less than that, for example, the design could be, say, $60 million instead of 100, that $40 million is automatically rolled into the construction side of the project.
Okay. So those grant funds are not earmarked specifically for up to that phase. They're for a system as a whole. And we
Right.
obviously have to prove to them that we're using the money responsibly and it's toward the system. And
Right. They're primary, the applications were for the design because we assumed we would use it all for the design, but they can be reprogrammed by requesting of the state, which we quite often do as funds are left over from a project. So anything that's left over from the design phase, we'll reprogram and carry on into the construction phase.
The justification for the money from the Department of Homeland Security is specifically for interoperability, and we've identified the LA RICS project as that, the destination for that funding. And as Chief Keen said, that can be adjusted according to cost variations as we incur them.
so it appears that today, the most likely constant of a partner throughout this process is going to be the LA County.
Correct.
I'm not saying anything good or bad about all the other potential 80-some, 90-some partners or what have you, but it appears that our most likely partner through thick and thin is going to be the LA County.
Yes, the county has approved the JPA except for the amendments that we are recommending. And they, I would say, are our essential partner because if the city and the county don't join together, it'll have lesser value to the other cities. And
Well, and if the city doesn't join the JPA does not exist. The way the JPA document is structured, the Joint Powers Authority comes into existence at the point that the city and county,
City of Los Angeles, County
City of Los Angeles and County of Los Angeles
kinda like the UN.
approve the
Lot of members,
JPA document.
but
Then
without-
the other cities can join.
Without the big, powerful countries, nothing gets passed.
Correct.
Okay. So we're making sure that we retain our, at least by population, we're about 40% of the county-ish, right? Give or take a couple of percent.
Correct.
Somewhere
So
there
the
you
bottom line is we're exceeding 1/3, so we're exercising our bigness in this whole thing.
And with the county and the city coming together, the sheriff has approximately 40 different cities that it contracts with, and then the county fire department has a similar number. So we're actually getting a large portion of the entire county just with the county and the city being partners.
Okay. I didn't know that. About 40 and 40, huh? They're
believe so.
fire and police?
It's in that area.
Not
yes.
exactly, but in that round.
Roughly.
Yeah, because you have some cities that contract for both police and fire, some just for fire.
City of San Fernando contracts fire. City
With
of San
us.
Fernando has their
With
own
us.
police.
Yeah.
So some have one, some have both. One has one, not the other. Okay. Any question?
I was just wondering, in the public safety, there's one city department that hadn't bought in. Is that DWP or one of the proprietaries?
We just met with DWP again yesterday with their technical people, and they would like to join, but one of the things we have to do with all participants, other than public safety agencies who are brought right in, is they have to provide load information on how much they would use the system, and then we'd ensure that any assets we had accrued and that they would be able to handle their load and not impact the public safety agencies. So we're going through that process with them right now.
'Cause I would think that with their growing department and, what is it now, they have 4 airports, and the potential of terrorists and all that other stuff would be absolutely essential that they be a part of that whole.
Right, well, the Port of LA and LA World Airports are participants. DWP is the one that we're checking on their load. We don't think it'll be significant.
DWP provides them with their power, water, right?
Provides us
They're
all
connected.
with our power in the city of Los Angeles, yes.
And they're even more strung out than anybody else as far as property and.
Right, well, when we were discussing with them yesterday, they go to Oregon, Utah, they're all over the place, but this system's primarily LA County and a first responder system. So initially, we have to ensure that all of the first responders have real-time communications as they need it. And then as capacity is available, we're bringing on Public Works. There's a potential of adding 240 frequencies to this process through TV channel 15, which the Sheriff's Department has applied for through the FCC, and we hope to hear by the end of the year if we'll get that. If we get an additional 240 frequencies, we'll have plenty of capacity for everyone. There's also another option. Both the city and the county have 800 megahertz trunked radio systems that Public Works operate on. The counties covers the whole county. The city, of course, just covers the LA city. They're similar systems, same company, same everything. And that's a potential, if we can't get all the Public Works people on the LA RIC system, that they could all ride on those existing systems and then tie the two together in the back end so we can communicate as necessary. But typically for us, for LA Fire, when we're dealing with power, we want a supervisor on scene face to face that we can make sure that whatever we want the power cut to is actually cut. We prefer not to talk to them by radio and take something from them by radio. Certainly we'll talk to LAPD or fire, and we have a great degree of trust in what communications we receive there. But with DWP and so forth, we like that face to face to make sure that they've actually done what we've requested.
Now, their security is growing also, right?
It is, but I don't have exact numbers on it, but I don't believe they're anything like, say, for example, LA Unified School District, which is the fourth largest police agency in the county. They have 450 police officers, and then it drops down to Glendale at 283. So I think they have a relatively small actual security force.
Thank you. We're on item number 6. Is anybody here to make public comment on item number 6? Seeing and hearing none, public comment on item number 6 is now closed. Okay, this has also been referred to Budget and Finance Committee, and we have a motion to approve the CLA and CAO report. So this item's approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We now move back to item number 4. Thank you.
Item number 4, GSD report relative to amending and approval of rent credits to the California Pita and Grill for building improvements at the Los Angeles Mall.
This request is for a technical correction to a previous council approval on rent credit to California PETA. The technical correction is to apply the rent credit to rent owed and also for future rent, plus a deduction of $4,310 for plumbing repairs performed by the city forces on the suite.
Okay. So this is basically an offset, and this is something that is mutually agreeable from us, the landlord, and also the tenant.
Correct,
Okay,
yes.
so it's a fair compromise between what they should be allowed to deduct and what we feel is fair for them to be able to get credit for.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Any questions? No. Okay. We're on item number 4. Is anybody here to make public comment on item number 4? Seeing and hearing no one coming forward on public comment on item number 4, public comment is now closed. With that, we have a motion to approve this item. This item is approved. Thank you. We now move to item number 5.
Item number 5, GSD report relative to amending a rent credit to Sabaro's Italian Eatery for building improvements at the Los Angeles Mall.
This is also a request for technical correction to an original council approval or authority approving rent credit for Sabaro, and for the rent credit to apply to rent owed and or for future rent.
So what's the total amount?
It's 18,000.
18,000. So 8,000 for the air conditioning upgrades and 10,000 for the panel improvements?
For
It says electrical panel, that's what I mean by
the
that.
air conditioning upgrade, yes.
So either way, it's going toward rents. Any questions? Okay. Is there anybody here to make public comment on item number 5? Anybody here for public comment on item number 5? Seeing and hearing no one come forward on public comment on item number 5, public comment on item number 5 is now closed. With that, we have a motion to approve that item. This item is approved. Does that conclude the items on the agenda?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Is anybody here for general public comment to this committee? We have now opened it up for general public comment to this committee. Seeing and hearing no one come forward on general public comment is now closed. This committee is now adjourned. Thank you.